Black woman pays bus fare for a stranger turns out. He's a billionaire and shocks everyone. A drizzle fell over the streets of New York, casting a misty veil over the skyscrapers and the rushing crowd. Amara Johnson, a 20-year-old Black American nursing intern, squeezed herself onto the crowded number 42 bus, a heavy backpack slung over her shoulders. Her eyes, though weary after a long night shift at St. Mary's Hospital, remained observant as they swept over the passengers around her, an older woman clutching her handbag tightly, a young mother trying to calm her crying baby, and a teenage boy dozing off one earbud dangling from his ear. Amara tightened her backpack straps, feeling the few coins in her coat pocket, just enough for the bus fare and a modest lunch after her shift. That morning the sky was gray, and the atmosphere on the bus felt heavy with the silence of exhausted people. Amara stood near the rear door, trying to maintain her balance as the bus jolted over potholes. She thought of her mother Grace lying on the worn-out couch in their tiny Bronx apartment, her breathing shallow due to chronic lung disease. Medical bills were piling up on the kitchen table, and the rent was 3 days overdue. Amara bit her lip, telling herself she had to ask for more shifts, even though her body begged for rest. The bus stopped at the next station, and a tall man stepped on. He wore a gray wool coat, simple yet finely tailored, and his polished leather shoes looked oddly out of place against the muddy bus floor. Amara noticed him, not because of his appearance, but because of the awkward way he fumbled for his wallet, when the bus driver, a middle-aged man with a scowling face, barked, "Fare, hurry up." The man patted his coat pocket, then his pants pockets, a flicker of confusion crossing his face. "Sorry, I think I forgot my wallet," he said, his voice deep but clear, tinged with slight embarrassment. The driver snorted, eyes skeptical. "No money, no ride. Rules are rules." A few passengers began to murmur, some annoyed, and others watching silently. Amara felt the tension in the air. She'd seen situations like this before, where someone was kicked off the bus for being a few cents short. Somehow, something in the man's voice made her believe he wasn't lying. Maybe it was the sincerity in his apology, or the way he bowed his head slightly, as if trying not to bother anyone. Without hesitation, Amara stepped forward, her small hand pulling a few coins from her coat pocket. "I'll cover him," she said quietly, just loud enough for the driver to hear. She dropped the money into the tray, her eyes briefly meeting the men before returning to her spot. The driver shrugged, pulled the lever, and the bus started rolling again. The man turned to Amara, a warm smile spreading across his face. "Thank you," he whispered, his eyes shining with genuine gratitude. "I appreciate it." Amara nodded, a bit shy. "It's nothing, just a few coins." She turned away, avoiding his gaze, her cheeks slightly warm. She wasn't used to being the center of attention, and what she had done was instinct, something her mother had taught her, that even the slightest kindness could change someone's day. The man seemed to want to say more, but instead he just smiled and took a step back, careful not to make her uncomfortable. The bus continued to roll through the wet streets, neon lights from store signs reflecting off the windows. Amara hugged her backpack and tried to focus on her to-do list. Get to the hospital, check her shift schedule, call to check on her mom, and figure out how to request an advance on her paycheck. She didn't realize the man was still quietly observing her from a distance, his eyes filled with curiosity and respect. To Amara, it was just a small moment in an endless string of tiring days. But to the man, that moment was the beginning of something far greater. That man was Ethan Harper, a white American CEO of Harper Innovations, a multi-billion-dollar technology and healthcare corporation. That day, Ethan had intentionally left his wallet at home, wanting to experience ordinary life, something he rarely had the chance to do in a world of boardroom meetings, luxury cars, and million-dollar contracts. He wanted to understand better the people his company claimed to serve, the everyday workers fighting daily to survive. But he hadn't expected that a young woman with just a few coins and a simple act of kindness would make him stop and reflect. Amara got off the bus near St. Mary's Hospital, her thin coat soaked from the rain. She hurried into the main lobby, unaware that Ethan was still on the bus, watching her silhouette disappear into the distance. He pulled his phone from his coat pocket and told his assistant, "Find information on a nursing intern named Amara Johnson at St. Mary's Hospital." Ethan wasn't sure why he did it, but he felt a strong urge to know more about her, the girl who had paid for a stranger's fare without expecting anything in return. Meanwhile, Amara stepped into the hospital locker room, took off her coat, and changed into her nurse uniform. She checked her phone and saw a message from her mother. "Don't forget to eat breakfast." "I'm okay." Amara smiled, but the smile quickly faded as she thought of the latest medical bill. She shoved the phone into her pocket, tied her hair into a neat bun, and prepared for another long day. The man on the bus with his warm smile and sincere gratitude was just a fleeting memory, a small bright spot in her difficult life. But that moment, though, small, had planted a seed of kindness, an unexpected connection, and a story that would soon shake both their lives. Beneath the city lights, Amara had no idea that her simple act of generosity had touched someone with the power to change her fate, and that the journey ahead would test her courage, her dignity, and her heart in ways she had never imagined. In the office on the top floor of the Harper Innovations Tower, Ethan Harper sat pensively before the large glass window, gazing down at the shimmering traffic lights below in the heart of New York City. The sunset bathed the skyscrapers in gold, but his mind was far from the world of million-dollar contracts or the stacks of financial reports on his desk. He was thinking about Amara Johnson, the young woman from the bus that morning, who had paid his fare with the last coins in her pocket without a second thought. That sincere yet straightforward act stirred something in Ethan he hadn't felt in a long time: unconditional kindness. Ethan, a 32-year-old white American, was the CEO of Harper Innovations, a leading medical technology and artificial intelligence corporation. With neatly combed dark brown hair, piercing blue eyes, and the confident posture of someone accustomed to leading, he was the epitome of success. But behind the polished exterior, Ethan carried a deep uncertainty. Raised in wealth and educated at elite schools, he had recently questioned whether his company made a difference for those who needed it most, or had become a profit machine. His decision to leave his wallet at home and take the bus today was an experiment. He wanted to experience the life of ordinary people, those his company's charity campaigns claimed to support. Ethan turned in his chair, picked up his phone, and opened a message from his assistant, Sarah. She had sent a brief profile on Amara Johnson, compiled from public records and information from St. Mary's Hospital. Amara Johnson, 20 years old, is a nursing intern at St. Mary's, born and raised in the Bronx. She currently lives with her mother, Grace Johnson, who suffers from chronic lung disease. No criminal record, strong academic performance, currently preparing for the nursing certification exam. Ethan skimmed through it, his eyes stopping at one detail. Amara worked up to 60 hours a week while caring for her mother and studying. He murmured, "How does she manage all that?" Amara's action on the bus hadn't just impressed Ethan. It had awakened a part of him he had buried under boardroom meetings and cold handshakes. He remembered her eyes, tired but resolute eyes, and her soft smile when she said, "It's just a few coins." It may have been a small gesture to Amara, but it reminded Ethan that kindness didn't need a reason or condition. He wanted to do something for her not just out of gratitude, but to prove to himself that he could make a real difference, not just through numbers on a report. Ethan walked over to his bookshelf, and pulled out a file on Harper Innovations' charitable programs. Among them, he focused on Summit Health, a state-of-the-art medical clinic under the company that provided high-quality care to low-income patients through grant-funded appointments. He thought of Grace, Amara's mother, and wondered if a free health check voucher at Summit could ease some of her burden. But he also knew that given the strong spirit he sensed in Amara, she might refuse help if it looked like pity. He picked up the phone and called Sarah. "Schedule a visit to St. Mary's Hospital tomorrow. I want to meet Amara Johnson, but keep my identity private. I'm a representative from Harper Innovations. And prepare a free medical voucher for Summit Health, but make it look like part of a regular charity initiative." Familiar with Ethan's sudden requests, Sarah replied, "Understood, sir." Ethan hung up, feeling a surge of energy flow through him. For the first time in months, he thought he was doing something meaningful not for profit, but for a specific person. Meanwhile, in the small apartment in the Bronx, Amara sat at the worn kitchen table, the flickering fluorescent light illuminating her stack of medical notes. In front of her was a cold cup of coffee and a pile of bills, her mother's medications, the electricity bill, and a notice from the landlord about the overdue rent. Amara rubbed her temples, trying to focus on the lesson about medication dosages. Still, her mind drifted to the image of her mother Grace, lying on the couch in the living room, breathing heavily, even after using the nebulizer. Despite her poor health, Grace tried to stay optimistic. "Amara, take a break," she called from the living room, her voice weak but warm. Amara smiled and walked over to her. "You're the one who needs rest," she said, adjusting the pillow behind her mother's back. Grace held her daughter's hand, pride shining in her eyes. "You remind me of myself when I was younger, always doing everything for the family. But don't forget to live for yourself too. Okay?" Amara nodded, but deep down, she knew her life now revolved around one goal: keeping her mother healthy and passing the exam to become a certified nurse. Amara didn't think much about the man on the bus. To her, it was just another fleeting moment in an endless string of hard days. But that moment had left a mark on Ethan's mind. He felt a strong urge as he sat back at his desk, looking out at the city transitioning into night. He wanted to meet Amara again, not just to thank her, but to understand more about her, the person who had made him believe that there were still sincere hearts in a world full of calculation. Ethan opened his laptop and looked over his schedule for the next day. A meeting with investors, a presentation on the new AI healthcare project, and a spontaneous trip to St. Mary's. He knew this could attract attention, especially from his brother Caleb Harper, who was always wary of any move that could affect the company's reputation. But Ethan didn't care. He acted with his heart, not his head, for the first time. He wanted to see Amara again, not as a CEO, but as someone who had received kindness and tried to return it. After clearing the kitchen table, Amara checked on her mother before bed. She turned off the lights and lay on the thin mattress in the living room corner to stay closer to her mom. The streetlight streamed through the curtain slits, casting a pattern on the patched-up ceiling. She closed her eyes, thinking about tomorrow, another shift, another day of studying, and a small hope that everything would be okay. She had no idea that a powerful man was planning to step into her life on the other side of the city, bringing opportunities and challenges she had never imagined. The small apartment in the Bronx where Amara Johnson lived was shrouded in darkness, with only a faint glow coming from an old desk lamp on the kitchen table. It was nearly midnight, but Amara was still there, her tired eyes skimming dense notes on medication dosages and emergency procedures. In front of her sat a cold cup of tea and a neatly stacked pile of bills, medication costs for her mother, the electricity bill, and a warning letter from the landlord about overdue rent. Amara rubbed her temples, trying to ease the dull headache that had been building. She knew she needed sleep, but every minute spent not studying felt like a minute she was falling behind in her journey to become a certified nurse. In the living room, Grace, Amara's mother, lay on a worn-out couch, her breathing raspy even after using the nebulizer. Her chronic lung disease had weakened her significantly over the past year, and the current medications only kept her stable, they couldn't cure her. Amara, a 20-year-old black woman, had grown used to caring for her mother since she was a child. But now, as she juggled a nursing internship at St. Mary's Hospital with exam preparation, that responsibility felt heavier than ever. Amara glanced at her mother and saw her sleeping her gaunt face at peace. She stood up, gently, adjusted the thin blanket covering her, then returned to her desk. A wave of anxiety rose within her. Last week, the doctor at the public clinic had warned that Grace needed more intensive treatment, possibly immunotherapy or oxygen therapy, but the costs were far beyond Amara's means. Her intern salary barely covered the essentials, and her small savings had long been depleted. She considered picking up extra shifts, but her body was nearly at its limit, and she feared that missing study time could jeopardize her chances of passing the upcoming certification exam. Grace stirred slightly and opened her eyes. "Amara, are you still awake?" Her voice was weak but full of love. Amara quickly stood and walked over. "I'm just studying a little more, Mom. Don't worry." Grace took her daughter's hand, bony but warm. "You remind me of myself," she said, her eyes sparkling with memories. "When your father passed away, I worked day and night to raise you. But darling, don't let life become just a burden. You deserve moments of joy." Amara smiled, but there was sorrow behind it. "You're everything to me," she said softly. "As long as you're healthy, I'll do anything." Grace shook her head gently as if to protest, but squeezed Amara's hand. "I'm proud of you, but I don't want you to sacrifice your future. Promise me you'll find a way to balance things, okay?" Amara nodded, knowing how difficult that promise would be to keep. To her, her mother was the reason she kept going, the light guiding her through her darkest days. Grace began to tell an old story about when she worked 2 shifts at a restaurant to pay for Amara's education. "There were days I thought I'd collapse," she said, "but I found strength again every time I saw your smile. You must find your strength too, Amara, not just for me, but yourself." Her words were like a small flame, sparking a new resolve within Amara. She hugged her mother, feeling the frail but loving warmth in her arms, and whispered, "I'll make it, Mom. I promise." Amara returned to the desk, but her mind was no longer on the textbooks. She thought of the days gone by, how she and her mother had weathered hardships together, nights without power meals, consisting of just bread and soup, and the times her mother tried to hide her pain so Amara wouldn't worry. She knew she couldn't let her mother down. The nursing exam was her chance to secure a stable job, a better income, and most importantly, the ability to afford proper treatment for Grace. But the pressure often made her feel like she was carrying the world's weight on her shoulders. She closed her eyes, trying to shake off the image of the man from the bus that morning, the stranger with a warm smile and sincere gratitude. Paying for his fare had been a fleeting moment, a reflex she had learned from her mother to help others when you can, even when you're struggling. Amara didn't know his name, who he was, or if she would ever see him again. To her, it was just a small glimmer of light amid hardship. But the memory of his grateful eyes, even just for a moment, brought a little warmth in the storm of her life. Amara stood up, cleaned the kitchen table, and turned off the light. She laid a thin blanket on the living room floor near her mother's couch so she could hear if she needed anything during the night. Lying down, she stared at the stained ceiling as streetlights filtered through the curtain slits, casting faint shadows. She thought about tomorrow, a 12-hour shift, a group study session for the exam, and a phone call to the landlord to ask for more time to pay rent. Every day was a battle, but Amara was used to fighting. She closed her eyes and whispered, "As long as Mom's okay, it's all worth it." Ethan Harper was still awake, in a luxurious penthouse on the other side of the city. He stood by the window holding a cup of cold coffee, looking at the city lights twinkling like stars. The image of Amara on the bus kept returning to his mind, not because she stood out in the world's eyes, but because she had done something he rarely saw in his elite circle and act without expecting anything in return. He opened his laptop, reread her file, and felt an intense urge. He wanted to help her not just out of gratitude, but to prove he could do something meaningful beyond numbers and contracts. Ethan knew this wouldn't be easy. He instructed Sarah to keep his identity hidden when meeting Amara, because he didn't want her to feel pressured or suspicious. But he also knew that with the resilience he sensed in her file, Amara might reject any help that felt like charity. He would have to find a subtle way in something that would feel like an opportunity, not pity. And deep down, Ethan felt something else, a curiosity, a connection he couldn't yet name. Amara, drifting into restless sleep, had no idea her life was about to change. With his sincere eyes and warm smile, the man from the bus prepared to enter her world, bringing hope and challenges she had never imagined. Beneath the city lights, their fates were beginning to intertwine, like intersecting roads in an endless night. The afternoon at St. Mary's Hospital bustled as usual, filled with the hurried footsteps of nurses, the ringing of phones at the reception desk, and the rumble of gurneys rolling across the tiled floors. Amara Johnson, dressed in a light blue nurse's uniform, moved swiftly between patient rooms, checking medical charts and assisting with care. Her hair was tied neatly into a low bun, and her dark brown eyes were focused, though they couldn't hide the fatigue from a long shift. Though she had been working non-stop since morning, she still offered a gentle smile as she chatted with an elderly patient, helping her adjust her pillow for comfort. Amara had just finished taking a patient's blood pressure when Maya, a close coworker, called out to her from down the hall. "Amara, someone at the reception wants to see you. He says he's from Harper Innovations or something." Amara frowned, not remembering any connection to such a large company. Harper Innovations. They must have the wrong person, she said, wiping her hands with a paper towel as she followed Maya. Her mind raced with questions. Was it something to do with her mother's medical bills, or an issue with the hospital? She clenched her hands, trying to stay calm. A tall man stood waiting at the reception desk in the busy hospital space. He wore a dark gray tailored suit, his dark brown hair neatly styled, and his sharp blue eyes scanned the medical posters on the wall. When Amara approached, he turned, and a warm smile spread. Amara froze. It was the man from the bus the other day, the one she had paid the fare for. But today he looked completely different, no longer awkward, but exuding confidence and authority. "Ms. Johnson," he spoke, his voice deep and clear. "I'm Ethan Harper from Harper Innovations. Thank you for helping me on the bus the other day." Amara blinked, trying to process the information. You were that man?" she asked, her voice a little hesitant. Ethan nodded, his eyes glimmering with sincerity that caught her off guard. "That was me. I had a bit of a situation that day, and you saved me from an awkward moment. I wanted to repay the favor." Amara shook her head, her cheeks turning slightly pink with embarrassment. "There's no need. It was just a few coins." But Ethan wasn't about to let it go. He pulled a small envelope from his pocket. Inside was a voucher for a free medical consultation at Summit Health, a state-of-the-art clinic run by Harper Innovations. "This is part of our charitable program," he explained. "It includes a full checkup and certain treatments if needed. I heard your mother's ill, and I thought this might help." Amara took the envelope, her fingers trembling slightly. She knew Summit Health, a place people like her could barely dream of affording, with advanced equipment and top-tier doctors. The thought that her mother Grace could be cared for there made her heart race, but her pride held her back. "I appreciate it," she said quietly. but I can't accept something if I don't want to feel like I'm being pitied." Ethan looked at her, his gaze soft but firm. "I understand. This isn't charity. It's fairness. You helped me, and I want to return the kindness. If you choose not to use it, I respect that. But at least keep it. And if your mother ever needs it, it's there." Amara bit her lip torn. Finally, she nodded and tucked the envelope into her uniform pocket. "Thank you," she said softly. "I'll think about it." Ethan smiled as if a weight had been lifted. "Do you have time for a coffee?" he asked, gesturing toward the small cafe in the hospital courtyard. "I'd love to hear more about your work. Being a nurse can't be easy." Amara hesitated, glancing at the clock. She still had 20 minutes left on her lunch break. Though exhausted, she couldn't bring herself to refuse his sincerity. "All right, but just for a bit," she replied, leading the way. In a cozy corner of the cafe, the aroma of roasted coffee filled the air. Amara and Ethan sat across from each other. Amara sipped a cup of hot tea, feeling her body slowly relax. Ethan asked about her job, and she spoke, her voice gentle but full of passion. "I've always wanted to be a nurse," she said, her eyes lighting up. "When my mother first got sick, I watched how the nurses at the hospital cared for her. They didn't just heal, they gave hope. I want to do that. Bring hope to others." Ethan listened, captivated by her story. He realized Amara wasn't just the kind girl from the bus. She was someone with dreams and determination, despite the weight of her struggles. In turn, he shared a bit about himself, not as a CEO, but as someone searching for meaning. "My company runs many big projects," he said, his voice low, "but sometimes I wonder if we're reaching the people who need help most. Meeting you that day reminded me that small things can make a difference." Amara smiled, feeling comfortable with him for the first time. "Like a few coins on a bus," she teased. Ethan laughed heartily and nodded. "Exactly. Sometimes a few coins are all it takes." Their conversation flowed quickly, and when Amara checked the time, she was startled to see her break was over. "I have to get back to work," she said, standing up. "Thank you for the tea and everything." Ethan also stood and handed her a simple business card, bearing only his name and phone number. "If you need anything, or just want to talk, call me," he said. Amara took the card, feeling the weight of the thick paper, and nodded. "I will," she replied, though she knew she probably wouldn't. She didn't like relying on anyone, especially a stranger, no matter how kind he seemed. As Amara returned to the hospital corridor, she slipped the business card into her pocket, her mind spinning. She wasn't sure what to make of Ethan Harper, who he was, why he cared, or whether she should use the medical voucher. But a part of her, however small, felt a sense of relief. For the first time in months, she felt like someone truly saw her not just as a struggling intern, but as a human being with dreams and burdens. Meanwhile, Ethan left the hospital and stepped into the waiting car. He looked out the window, thinking about Amara. She was nothing like the people in his world, no schemes, no pretense. He knew he had to be careful. His actions could be misinterpreted, especially by his brother Caleb, who always distrusted anyone getting close to the Harper family. But Ethan didn't care. He had found someone who made him want to act, not for reputation or gain, but because of the kindness she had offered him on that bus. At work, Amara had no idea this meeting was just the beginning. Beneath the city lights, her fate and Ethan's were now intertwined, bringing both opportunity and storms she had yet to foresee. The atmosphere at St. Mary's Hospital in the early morning was as hectic as always, filled with the hurried footsteps of nurses, the beeping of pagers, and the faint scent of disinfectant drifting through the hallways. Amara Johnson, in her pale blue nurse uniform, moved quickly between patient rooms, carrying a tray of medical tools. Her dark brown eyes shone with focus, but deep inside, a wave of anxiety was rising. After yesterday's unexpected encounter with Ethan Harper, when he gave her a free medical voucher for Summit Health, Amara felt both grateful and uneasy. She, a 20-year-old black woman, had never been comfortable accepting help from strangers, especially someone like Ethan, with his expensive suit and smile that left her flustered. Amara had just finished rebandaging a patient when Maya, her close co-worker, pulled her into a corner of the hallway. "Amara, have you heard the news?" Maya whispered, her eyes filled with concern. "People are starting to talk about you. They say you're getting special treatment from a big donor, maybe from Harper Innovations. Do you know anything about that?" Amara froze, her heart pounding. I just received a medical voucher for my mom," she replied softly. "That's all there is." Maya gripped her hand, her voice warning. "Be careful. Mrs. Carter, the hospital administrator, doesn't like rumors. You'll be in trouble if they think you're getting special privileges." Amara nodded, but inside she felt tangled and confused. She hadn't expected Ethan's kind gesture to draw attention so quickly. She thought of her mother Grace suffering from chronic lung disease, and the voucher tucked inside her pocket, a glimmer of hope for better care. But was it worth the cost? If this help made her a target at the hospital where she was fighting to become a certified nurse? She clenched her hands, determined not to let gossip shake her, but the seed of doubt had been planted. Meanwhile, at the Harper Innovations Tower, Ethan Harper sat in his office, gazing out at the city of New York as it came to life. The 32-year-old white American CEO had just received a report from his assistant Sarah about Amara's financial situation. "Ms. Johnson is 2 months behind on rent," Sarah said over the phone. "The landlord has issued an eviction notice." Ethan frowned, a feeling of injustice welling up inside him. He thought of Amara, the girl who had paid his bus fare, even while struggling herself. Without hesitation, he gave an order: "Cover her rent. Use my account. Make sure she doesn't know it's from me." Ethan knew this action could attract attention, but he couldn't just stand by and let Amara lose her home. He wanted to help, not just to repay her, but because she had awakened a part of him he thought he was gone, a belief in unconditional kindness. However, he didn't anticipate that his decision would come under the scrutiny of Caleb Harper, his older brother, and the vice president of Harper Innovations. With sandy blonde hair and cold, sharp eyes, Caleb was reviewing financial reports in his office when he received a notification from the accounting department about the unusual transaction from Ethan's account. "Rent payment for an Amara Johnson," he muttered, curling his lips into a smirk. Caleb, 35, had always lived in his younger brother's shadow. Despite being the eldest, he had never received the praise Ethan did from their parents, or the board of directors who saw Ethan as the genius of the family. That jealousy now flared as he realized Ethan was recklessly helping a girl of unknown background when the company was preparing to sign a major deal with Global Med. Caleb picked up his phone and called a familiar contact in the media, Vanessa Lee, a freelance journalist known for her sensational stories. "Vanessa, I've got an interesting story," he said smoothly. "A nursing intern named Amara Johnson seems to be receiving financial support from my brother, Ethan Harper. Could you look into it? See if she's taking advantage of him." Sensing an opportunity for a big scoop, Vanessa readily agreed. "I'll dig deep," she said. Caleb hung up, satisfaction washing over him. He wasn't just protecting the company's reputation. He wanted to use Amara to bring Ethan down and prove his brother wasn't fit to lead. Back in the Bronx, Amara sat beside her mother Grace after finishing her shift. Though weak Grace was trying to knit a scarf, her eyes filled with love as she looked at her daughter. "You look worried," she said, setting down the knitting needles. Amara sighed and told her about the rumors at the hospital and her meeting with Ethan. "I didn't want to accept help, Mom, but I needed it for you. Now everyone thinks I'm using him." Grace held her hand, her voice strong. Sweetheart, kindness is never wrong, but you must protect yourself. If they doubt you, prove them wrong through your actions. Amara nodded, drawing strength from her mother's words. She took the medical voucher from her pocket and placed it on the table. I'm going to take you to Summit Health, she said firmly. But I won't let this rumor destroy me. Grace smiled, stroking her daughter's hair. That's my girl. That night, Amara received a text from her landlord. Your rent has been paid. You may stay. She stood frozen, not knowing who had helped, but her intuition told her it was Ethan. She messaged him. Did you pay my rent? I need to know. Ethan replied. I just want you and your mother to be safe. Don't worry, I'll explain later. Amara read the message, feeling both grateful and conflicted. She didn't know that Caleb had already discovered the payment and that Vanessa was preparing to approach her. Ethan looked out at the city in his office, thinking of Amara. He knew his actions could be risky, but he had no regrets. She wasn't just a recipient of kindness. She had made him believe he could do the right thing. But he hadn't foreseen that Caleb had already planted seeds of doubt, and they were beginning to take root quickly. Under the city lights, Amara stood at a dangerous crossroads where Ethan's kindness and Caleb's scheme were on a collision course. The light from New York's skyscrapers spilled through the windows of Caleb Harper's office, casting fractured patterns across the walnut desk. Caleb, vice president of Harper Innovations, stood in front of the window, hands in his pockets, his cold blue eyes gazing down at the city as it slipped into the night. He had just received a report from Vanessa Lee, the freelance journalist he'd hired to investigate Amara Johnson, the nursing intern. His younger brother, Ethan Harper, was helping unusually. She's clean, Vanessa said over the phone, her voice tinged with disappointment. No bad debt, no scandals. But I'm tracking her financial transactions. The rent payment from Ethan stands out. Caleb smirked, his voice sharp as steel. Dig deeper, Vanessa. I don't care how innocent she looks. Please find a way to make her look like she's taking advantage of Ethan. One well-timed article will catch the board's attention. He hung up, a wave of satisfaction washing over him. Caleb, 35, had always lived in Ethan's shadow, the younger CEO of Harper Innovations. Despite being the eldest, he was never favored by their parents or the board, who saw Ethan as the family's visionary. That jealousy now burned stronger than ever as he watched Ethan recklessly help Amara, just as the company prepared to finalize a major deal with Global Med. Caleb sank into his leather chair, opened his laptop, and reviewed Amara's file. A 20-year-old Black American woman, a nursing intern at St. Mary's Hospital, living with her chronically ill mother, with limited financial means. He didn't believe she was as innocent as Ethan claimed. No one turns down money without a motive, he muttered. He wanted to turn Amara into a scandal to protect the company's reputation and prove Ethan was unfit to lead, clearing the way for Caleb to seize control. Meanwhile, at St. Mary's Hospital, Amara Johnson stepped out of the locker room after her shift, her face tired, but her eyes steady. The rumors about her receiving support from Harper Innovations had spread, and she could feel the suspicious glances from coworkers. Maya, her close friend, pulled her aside into a hallway corner. Amara, Mrs. Carter asked about you today, Maya whispered. They're reviewing your file. Are you sure there's nothing shady going on with that company? Amara shook her head, her voice trembling slightly. I only accepted a medical voucher for my mother, Maya. That's all. I didn't ask for anything else. Amara felt cornered. She thought about Ethan, his warm smile, his sincerity when he handed her the voucher for Summit Health, and the secret rent payment she now suspected had come from him. She didn't blame him, but she wished things were simpler. She texted him, "We need to talk about the rent and the rumors." Ethan replied almost instantly, 7 p.m. The park near the hospital. I'll explain. At the park, the sunset bathed the trees in golden light. Ethan stood waiting, wearing a navy blue shirt, simple yet still exuding quiet authority. When he saw Amara, he smiled, but concern flickered in his blue eyes. "Are you okay?" he asked, leading her to a bench. Amara sat, going straight to the point. "You paid my rent, didn't you? Now the hospital suspects me, Ethan. They think I'm using you." Ethan sighed, his voice low. "I just wanted to help Amara. You were about to lose your home, and I couldn't just watch. But I was wrong not to ask you first. I'll deal with the rumors." Amara looked at him, torn between gratitude and confusion. "I don't want you to get into trouble because of me," she said. Ethan gently took her hand, his gaze unwavering. "You didn't do anything wrong. I'll talk to the hospital and clarify my decision." Their conversation was interrupted by Ethan's phone ringing. He frowned at the screen. It was Caleb. "I have to take this," he said, stepping aside. Amara could hear bits of Caleb's voice through the phone. "Ethan, what are you doing with that nurse? The board heard the rumors. Do you want to blow the global med deal?" Ethan clenched the phone tightly, his voice firm. "Caleb, this is my business. Amara has nothing to do with the company. Stay out of it." He hung up and turned back to Amara, tension etched across his face. "My brother, he disagrees with me helping you, but I'm not stopping." Amara felt a chill. She didn't know Caleb, but the voice she'd overheard was laced with threat. "Ethan, if this causes problems for you, I'll return the rent money," she said firmly. Ethan shook his head. "You don't owe me anything, Amara. You reminded me that kindness still exists. I'll handle Caleb." Back at home, Amara found her mother Grace reading a book. She looked a bit stronger. Amara told her about the rumors and her meeting with Ethan, and her voice was full of worry. Grace took her hand, her eyes filled with fierce strength. "Sweetheart, when I got sick, people accused me too, said I was faking it for benefits. But I never bowed my head. You must stand tall and prove them wrong." Amara hugged her, drawing strength from her mother's words. "I will, Mom." In his office, Caleb messaged Vanessa. "She met Ethan tonight. Could you find a way to approach her? Suggest an interview. I want the pressure turned up." Vanessa replied, "I'll go to the hospital tomorrow." Caleb smiled, knowing the net he was weaving around Amara was tightening. He didn't expect Ethan, driven by his resolve to protect her, to uncover the plot soon. Beneath the city lights, Amara stood at the edge of a storm. But her unwavering spirit and Ethan's support would be the light guiding her through the darkness. The corridors of St. Mary's Hospital gleamed under fluorescent lights, but this morning the air was heavy like a storm about to break. Amara Johnson walked briskly in her pale blue nurse uniform with a medical chart. Her dark brown eyes reflected focus, but inside her a wave of anxiety was rising. Rumors about her receiving support from Harper Innovations had spread throughout the hospital, and earlier that morning, Maya, her close colleague, had warned her, "Amara, Mrs. Carter wants to see you at 10. "It sounds serious." Amara nodded, trying to hide the sensation that the ground beneath her was collapsing. Amara, a 20-year-old black woman, was no stranger to hard days caring for her mother Grace, who suffered from chronic lung disease, working non-stop to pay bills, and studying to pass her nursing certification exam. But suspicion from the hospital, where she had pinned her hopes for a career, was a new and cruel blow. She thought of Ethan Harper, the man who had paid her rent and given her a medical voucher to Summit Health, and their meeting in the park the night before. He had promised to resolve the rumors, but Amara feared his kindness was pulling her into a dangerous maze. At precisely 10 a.m., Amara knocked on the office door of Mrs. Helen Carter, the hospital's administrator. Mrs. Carter, a middle-aged woman with silver hair pinned into a tight bun, sat behind her desk, eyes sharp. Beside her was Mr. David Lee from Human Resources, holding a folder. "Ms. Johnson." "Please, sit, Mrs." Carter said evenly, though her tone was cold. Amara sat down, hands clenched on her lap, struggling to appear calm. "We've received a report about your connection to Harper Innovations," Mrs. Carter began. "Specifically, financial support for your rent and a medical voucher to Summit Health. Can you explain?" Amara took a deep breath, her voice trembling slightly but steady. "Ma'am, I didn't request any help. I met Mr. Ethan Harper on a bus. I paid his fare when he forgot his wallet. Later, he gave me a medical voucher so my mother could get care at Summit Health. As for the rent, I don't know the full details, but I never asked for money. I want to do my job and take care of my mother." Mr. Lee took notes, his gaze skeptical. "Are you aware that Harper Innovations is a major partner of Summit Health, and that Summit is affiliated with this hospital receiving assistance could raise concerns about a conflict of interest?" Amara felt like she had been stabbed, but she held her head high. "I didn't know about any of those affiliations. I've never used hospital resources for personal gain. Everything I've done is to save my mother." Mrs. Carter crossed her arms, her voice stern. "We need to ensure transparency. Effective immediately, you will be placed under probation, restricted to administrative tasks only. If the investigation finds any misconduct, your internship may be terminated." Amara swallowed hard, her eyes stinging with unshed tears, but she nodded. "I understand, ma'am. I'll cooperate." Amara entered the locker room, leaving the office, her legs heavy like lead. She sat on the bench, covered her face, and held back tears. Maya found her and pulled her into a hug. "They're wrong, Amara," Maya said. "You didn't do anything wrong. Don't give up." Amara nodded, but the fear of losing her job and her dream of becoming a nurse suffocated her. She thought about Ethan, his promise, and wondered if she should call him. But pride held her back. She didn't want to rely on anyone further. Back at the Bronx apartment, Amara found her mother Grace knitting a scarf, concern in her eyes as she looked up. "Amara, what's wrong?" she asked, setting the needles down. Amara sat beside her. Her voice choked as she recounted the meeting and the probation. "I'm scared of losing everything, Mom, just because I accepted help." Grace held her hand, her eyes full of resolve. "Sweetheart, I was once doubted too when I applied for medical assistance, but I never bowed my head because I knew I was doing the right thing. So are you. You helped Ethan out of kindness, and he returned that kindness. Don't let them make you doubt yourself." Grace shared stories of the hard times she had faced raising Amara alone. "Once I had to sell my wedding ring to buy your medicine, but I never regretted it because you were my light. And now you are my light, Amara. Fight not just for me, but for your dream." Amara hugged her mother, tears streaming down her face, but her mother's words lit a fire inside her. "I won't give up," she whispered. That night, Amara received a message from Ethan. "I heard about the hospital. Can I help in any way?" She hesitated, then replied, "Thank you, but I need to handle this myself. I'll reach out if I need anything." She didn't know that Ethan was in his office facing Caleb at that very moment. "You're destroying this company over a nurse," Caleb roared. Ethan's eyes were hard. "Amara has done nothing wrong. If you want to fight me. Leave her out of it." Caleb sneered, but inside he knew Amara was becoming the center of a bigger storm. Under the city lights, Amara stood firm, but the pressure of suspicion was closing in around her. A blanket of gray clouds hovered over New York in the afternoon, mirroring Amara Johnson's heavy mood as she left St. Mary's Hospital. The probation order from Mrs. Helen Carter still weighed on her shoulders, restricting her to administrative duties and slashing her income. Amara, a 20-year-old black woman, tightened the straps of her backpack and walked briskly down the rain-slicked street, determined not to let the hospital's suspicions destroy her dream of becoming a certified nurse. She thought of her mother Grace and the medical voucher to Summit Health. Ethan Harper had given her a ray of hope for her mother's health, but also the source of the rumors, now spreading like wildfire. Amara knew she couldn't continue relying on Ethan's kindness, even though he had paid her rent and had always been ready to help. Her pride and Grace's words, "You have to stand tall," pushed her to find a way to support herself. Amara opened her old laptop in the small Bronx apartment and searched for nursing scholarship programs. She discovered a support fund from the New York Community Health Foundation, aimed at helping interns from disadvantaged backgrounds. The application required an essay and a letter of recommendation, but given her probation, Amara feared the hospital would refuse to support her. Still, she began to write. "I am the daughter of a single mother who taught me that kindness and perseverance can overcome any challenge. I want to become a nurse to bring hope to people like my mother." To increase her income, Amara visited Patel's Pharmacy, a local drugstore near her home, to apply for an evening cashier position. Mr. Patel, the store's owner, was impressed by her diligence and hired her immediately. "You have the eyes of someone who doesn't give up," he said. Amara smiled grateful. She knew the job would help her buy more medication for her mother and ease their financial burden. She left the pharmacy with hope, despite the exhaustion of long days and longer nights. One afternoon, Amara received a message from Ethan. "I've been worried about you since the hospital incident. Can we meet to talk?" She hesitated, her fingers hovering over the screen. Their last meeting in the park had left her with a warm feeling, but she feared that contact with Ethan might stir up more suspicion. Still, his sincerity made it hard to say no. She replied, 5 p.m., the bakery near the hospital. "I have 20 minutes. The scent of fresh bread and coffee filled the air at the bakery. Ethan was already seated wearing a gray sweater, and his blue eyes lit up when he saw Amara. "You look stronger than I expected," he said, sliding a cup of hot cocoa toward her. Amara took a sip, letting the warmth relax her body. "I'm trying," she said, then told him about the scholarship and her new job. "I don't want to keep relying on you, Ethan. You've already done so much, but I must stand alone." Ethan listened, his eyes filled with admiration. "You're incredible, Amara. But I have to apologize, paying your rent caused trouble. I only wanted you to be safe." Amara looked at him, her voice gentle. "I know you meant well, but the hospital thinks I'm exploiting you. I have to prove them wrong." Ethan paused, then confessed, "I'm under pressure too. My brother Caleb thinks I'm damaging the company, but meeting you and seeing how you fight makes me want to do the right thing, no matter how hard." Amara blinked, surprised by his openness. "I didn't think a CEO had moments like that," she said. Ethan gave a wistful smile. "I'm just human, Amara. You reminded me that kindness is worth fighting for." He reached across the table and gently took her hand, a quiet gesture full of meaning. Amara's heart beat faster. She wanted to let her hand stay there, but pulled it back with a smile. "Thank you for believing in me, Ethan." As they parted ways, Ethan said, "If you ever need anything, I'm here." Amara nodded, leaving the bakery with her heart stirred, but determined to keep her distance to protect herself. Back home, she found Grace knitting, looking healthier, thanks to the new medication. Amara told her about the latest job and meeting with Ethan, hiding her worry about the hospital. Grace took her hand. "You're doing the right thing, Amara. But don't forget to rest. I want to see you smile more." Amara hugged her mother, drawing strength from that love. Meanwhile, at Harper Innovations, Caleb received a report from Vanessa. Amara just started working at a pharmacy and applied for a scholarship. She's trying to appear self-reliant. Caleb frowned, his voice icy. "She's putting on a show." "Turn up the pressure, Vanessa. Push for an interview. Emphasize the rent money. I want her to break. Vanessa nodded, sensing a juicy story. She messaged Amara. Hi Amara, I'm Vanessa Lee, a journalist. I want to write about your mother and Summit Health. Can we meet? Amara read the message, and a wave of unease rose within her. She didn't reply, but she knew the pressure was mounting. Ethan, meanwhile, was informed by Sarah that Vanessa had contacted Amara. Suspicious of Caleb's involvement, Ethan kept a closer eye on his brother. Protect Amara, at all costs, he said. Under the city lights, Amara walked the path of self-reliance, but the whispers in the dark orchestrated by Caleb were drawing closer, ready to test her strength in ways she had never imagined. The streetlights of New York shimmered through the window of the small apartment in the Bronx, but inside, Amara Johnson, a storm of anxiety was rising. She sat at the kitchen table, the glow of an old desk lamp casting light on her weary face. In front of her was her phone, displaying a message from freelance journalist Vanessa Lee. Hi Amara. I'd like to write about your mother's treatment journey at Summit Health. Your story could inspire many. Can we meet to talk? Amara clenched her hands, feeling like a trap was being set. At 20 years old, a black woman juggling her mother's care, her job at St. Mary's Hospital, and her studies for the nursing exam, she was no stranger to pressure. But the suspicion from the hospital and the rumors about Harper Innovations made her feel like she was walking on thin ice. The probation order from Mrs. Helen Carter still lingered like a thorn in her side, limiting her to administrative tasks and reducing her income. Amara had tried to be self-reliant, taking an extra job at Patel's pharmacy and applying for a nursing scholarship, but Vanessa's message now posed a new threat. She suspected the journalist was linked to Caleb Harper, Ethan's brother, who had already shown hostility during the phone call she had overheard. Amara thought of Ethan, his warm smile, the sincerity when he held her hand at the bakery, and wondered if she should tell him about Vanessa. But she feared bringing him more trouble, especially with Caleb targeting them both. She got up and walked into the living room, where her mother Grace was reading under a dim light. Mom, she said softly, sitting beside her. A journalist wants to interview me about you and Summit Health. I don't know if I should agree. Grace set the book down, her eyes filled with resolve. You're afraid they'll twist the truth, right? Amara nodded, her voice anxious. The hospital already suspects me. If this interview makes things worse, I could lose my job. Grace took her daughter's hand, thin but warm. Sweetheart, I was once doubted when applying for medical assistance. They thought I was faking my illness, but I faced them and told them the truth. They had to listen. If you do this interview, tell our story about the hard days and Ethan's kindness. The truth will protect you. Amara looked at her mother, drawing strength from her words. You're right, she said, her voice firmer. But I need to prepare. I don't want them to smear me or Ethan. She messaged Ethan. Vanessa Lee wants to interview me about my mom and Summit Health. Do you know her? I need your advice. Ethan replied right away. I don't know her, but I'll look into it. Meet me at 6 p.m. at the park and we'll talk. Amara felt a sense of relief knowing Ethan would support her. She began jotting down key points for the interview, focusing on her mother's journey and Summit's charitable program, carefully avoiding mention of rent payments or the hospital. At Harper Innovations, Ethan sat in his office, his sharp blue eyes scanning a report from his assistant Sarah. Vanessa Lee is a freelance journalist, previously worked with several major outlets, Sarah said. She's asking about the Summit Health charity program, but I suspect someone's behind her. Ethan frowned immediately, thinking of Caleb. He knew his brother was trying to turn Amara into a scandal to bring him down. Keep an eye on Vanessa, he ordered. If she contacts Caleb, I want to know immediately. Ethan thought about Amara, her strength-shy smile, and refusal to lean on him. He felt a deep connection to her, not just because of the kindness she had shown him on the bus, but because she made him want to be a better man. He was determined to protect her, even if it meant confronting Caleb. He messaged her, "Don't worry, Amara. We'll handle this together." Meanwhile, Caleb received an update from Vanessa. "Amara is considering the interview," she reported. "I'll focus on Summit Health but hint at the rent. If she slips, I'll have a good angle." Caleb smirked coldly. "Good. Don't let her feel safe. I want her to break before the global med deal is signed." He knew a negative article could damage Ethan's credibility, paving the way for Caleb to take control of Harper Innovations. At the park, the golden glow of sunset filtered through the trees. Ethan waited wearing a gray button-up shirt, his eyes lighting up when he saw Amara. "You look determined," he said, leading her to a bench. Amara told him about Vanessa's message. Her voice tinged with worry. "I want to interview, but I'm afraid they'll distort it. What do you think I should do?" Ethan took her hand gently, his voice calm. "If you go through with it, control the story. Focus on your mother and Summit Health. I'll have the PR team at Summit support you to ensure Vanessa doesn't overstep." Amara looked at him, comforted by his support. "Thank you, Ethan. I didn't want to drag you into this, but I need you." Ethan smiled warmly. "You're not dragging me. I'm here willingly. You remind me that kindness is worth fighting for." They sat there sharing their fears and hopes, creating a moment of closeness that made Amara's heart flutter. Back home, Amara found Grace still knitting, her eyes filled with pride. She told her about the meeting with Ethan, and Grace said, "He's a good man, Amara, but you must be strong with or without him." Amara nodded, determined to face Vanessa. What she didn't know was that Caleb's trap was closing in, and Vanessa had already planned to visit the hospital, ready to push her into a difficult corner. Under the city lights, Amara braced herself for a new battle with truth as her only weapon. The morning sun shone brightly over New York, a rare burst of light, but in the small apartment in the Bronx, Amara Johnson felt a storm brewing. She sat at the kitchen table, the soft glow of an old desk lamp casting light over her face, where anxiety and resolve waged war. In front of her, her phone displayed a new message from Vanessa Lee. "Amara, I look forward to meeting you at Summit Health this Friday at 2 p.m. Your mother's story could be truly inspirational. Have you made your decision?" Amara clenched her hands, her heart pounding. She knew the interview might be her chance to tell the truth, but it could just as easily be a trap set by Caleb Harper, Ethan's brother. At 20 years old, Amara, a black woman, was fighting to stay afloat amidst her probation at St. Mary's Hospital. Rumors surrounding her connection to Harper Innovations, the Summit Health voucher, and the paid rent had cast doubt over her character and raised questions of conflict of interest. She had tried to stand independently by working extra shifts at Patel's pharmacy and applying for a nursing scholarship. Still, Vanessa's pressure made her feel like she was walking on a razor's edge. She thought of Ethan, the sincerity in his touch at the park bench, the promise that he would support her, and of her mother Grace's advice. "The truth will protect you." Amara walked into the living room, where Grace sat, knitting, her eyes gentle as she looked at her daughter. "Mom," Amara said, sitting beside her, "I'm going to interview with Vanessa, but I need you there. I want to tell our story, but I'm afraid they'll twist it." Grace paused her knitting and took Amara's hand. "Sweetheart, I once stood before a doctor shaking with fear, but I told the truth and they listened. You do the same. Please talk about the days we had nothing but each other. Talk about Ethan's kindness. I'll be there beside you." Amara hugged her, drawing strength from that love. "Thank you, Mom," she whispered, her determination deepening. Amara messaged Vanessa, "I agree to the interview, but only at Summit Health, and the focus must stay on my mother. I also want Summit's PR team present." Vanessa replied quickly, Wonderful. See you Friday. Amara set her phone down, feeling both relieved and nervous. She called Ethan to inform him. I'm doing the interview, she said, her voice slightly shaky. But I need Summit's PR team to be in control. Can you help in his Harper Innovations office? Ethan smiled through the phone. Of course, Amara. I'll contact them right away. You'll do great, I believe in you. Ethan immediately called the head of Summit Health's PR team, instructing them to coordinate with Vanessa and monitor everything closely. Don't let her go off script, he emphasized. Amara and her mother must be protected. The PR team agreed, fully aware of how important this was to Ethan. Still, he couldn't shake a feeling of unease. He suspected Caleb was behind Vanessa's approach, and the tense, threatening phone call with his brother days earlier made him worry Caleb might interfere directly in the interview. Ethan texted his assistant, Sarah, check all communications between Vanessa and Caleb. I need to know what he's planning. Meanwhile, Caleb received an update from Vanessa. Amara agreed to the interview, she reported, her voice brimming with anticipation. I'll focus on Summit Health, but gently bring up the rent. If she slips, I'll have a great angle. Caleb smirked, his icy gaze unwavering. Good. Don't let her off the hook. I want her and Ethan to fall apart before the Global Med deal is signed. He knew that one damaging article could ruin Ethan's reputation and clear the path for him to take control of Harper Innovations. He texted Vanessa. Increase the pressure, but subtly. I'll support you if needed. Amara spent the entire day preparing and writing down key talking points for the interview: her mother's illness, their hardships, and Ethan's kindness. She practiced with Grace, who gave feedback to help keep the story honest, but not overly emotional. Speak from the heart, Grace advised, but keep your head cool. Amara nodded, feeling more confident. She thought of Ethan, his unwavering support, his sincere gaze, and felt a gentle stirring in her chest. But she reminded herself to stay focused on her mother and career, not letting emotions take over. That night, Amara received an email from the New York Community Health Foundation. Her scholarship application had passed the first round, and she was invited to an in-person interview. She gasped in joy and hugged her mother. Mom, I have a chance. Grace smiled, tears shimmering in her eyes. You deserve this, Amara. The good news lit a fire in her heart, fueling her determination as the interview with Vanessa loomed. She texted Ethan, I made it to the next round for the scholarship interview. Thank you for always supporting me. Ethan replied, I knew you'd make it. Congratulations, Amara. Ethan looked out at the city from his office, thinking of Amara. He was proud of her resilience, but worried about the upcoming interview. He knew Caleb wouldn't stop, and Vanessa could be his pawn. Ethan called the PR team again, instructing them to prepare a contingency plan if Vanessa crossed any lines. Amara must not be harmed, he said firmly. Meanwhile, Caleb sipped wine in his luxurious apartment with a cold expression. He knew this interview was his chance to bring Ethan down, and he wouldn't waste it. With the camera and outline, Vanessa was ready to corner Amara. Under the city lights, Amara braced herself to face the truth, but the shadow of Caleb's doubt was closing in, ready to test the full measure of her courage. The main lobby of Summit Health Clinic in New York shimmered under a crystal chandelier, but today's atmosphere was tense like a string pulled taut. Amara Johnson stood near the entrance, gently holding her mother's hand. Grace sat in a wheelchair, a hand-knitted scarf wrapped around her shoulders. Amara, a 20-year-old black woman, wore a simple white blouse, her hair tied up high, and her deep brown eyes gleamed with a mix of resolve and unease. Today, she would face Vanessa Lee in an interview that could determine her reputation at St. Mary's Hospital and her dream of becoming a licensed nurse. Grace squeezed her hand, her voice frail but firm. You are my light, Amara. Just speak the truth." Amara nodded, feeling the warmth of her mother's words settle in her chest. She glanced around the room. The PR team from Summit Health was setting up lights and cameras. In the corner stood Ethan Harper, in a navy blue shirt, his piercing blue eyes full of quiet encouragement. He gave a slight nod. Amara smiled, comforted, but she knew with Caleb Harper's scheme looming, this interview wasn't just a chance to tell her mother's story. It was a battle to defend the truth. Vanessa entered wearing a gray blazer and a camera over her shoulder. Her professional smile was unwavering. "Amara, Mrs. Grace, thank you for coming," she said, shaking their hands. "Today we'll discuss Mrs. Grace's journey and Summit Health's charitable work." "Ready." Amara nodded, though her heart pounded. She had practiced with Grace and Ethan, committed to keeping the narrative focused on her mother's journey, steering clear of rent payments or hospital rumors. The interview took place in a small room arranged like a studio. Amara sat beside Grace, facing Vanessa and the camera. Summit's PR team stood nearby, monitoring closely. Vanessa began smoothly. "Amara, tell us about your mother and her chronic lung condition." Amara took a deep breath, her voice steady. "My mother, Grace, has battled illness for years. There were days she couldn't breathe without a nebulizer. Summit Health gave her access to advanced care, and I'm grateful for that." Grace added, her voice weak but warm. "Summit didn't just treat me. They gave me a reason to keep going. Amara is my strength." Vanessa nodded, jotting notes. "That's touching. Amara, how did you balance work and caregiving as a nursing intern?" Amara responded, "It's been hard, but my mother is my motivation. I want to become a nurse to bring hope to others like her." Everything was going well until Vanessa shifted tone, still calm but pointed. "Amara, there are rumors that you've received financial support from Harper Innovations, including rent assistance. Is that true?" Amara froze as if struck. She glanced at Ethan, who clenched his hands, worry in his eyes. The PR team furrowed their brows, ready to step in. Before Amara could speak, the door burst open. Caleb Harper strode in, wearing a black suit, his confident smile cold. A few staff members whispered. Cameras panned toward him. "Apologies for the interruption," Caleb said smoothly. "I'm Caleb Harper, Vice President of Harper Innovations. I'm here to ensure transparency." Amara felt her blood rush to her ears, heart pounding. Grace held her hand tightly, her gaze fierce. Vanessa seized the moment. "Mr. Harper, can you speak to the financial support for Amara? Did Harper Innovations pay her rent?" Caleb looked directly at Amara, his gaze sharp. "Yes. A payment was made through my brother Ethan's account. While we support charitable causes, we must also ensure no conflict of interest, especially since Ms. Johnson works at a hospital affiliated with Summit." The room fell silent save for the whir of cameras. Amara felt the floor tilt beneath her, but her mother's eyes and Ethan's presence anchored her. She stood up, voice trembling but firm. "My mother is fighting to live," she said, locking eyes with Vanessa and Caleb. "I helped Ethan Harper on a bus because I believe in kindness. He repaid that by helping my mother get care and keeping us from losing our home. I never asked for anything, and I have never used hospital resources for personal gain." She turned to the camera, her eyes fierce. "If accepting kindness to save my mother is a crime, I accept the blame, but I won't let anyone smear my mother or Ethan's compassion." Grace, her eyes shimmering with tears, squeezed Amara's hand. Ethan stepped forward, placing a firm hand on Amara's shoulder. "That's enough, Caleb," he said sharply. "This is about Mrs. Grace, not your power games." Vanessa, caught off guard by Amara's honesty, paused. She saw that the real story wasn't a scandal, but Amara's resilience. She turned to Caleb. "Mr. Harper, would you like to add anything?" Cornered. Caleb offered a tight smile. "I only want transparency. Harper Innovations supports Amara." But his eyes were cold, displeased. The interview ended with Amara and Grace embracing, tears glistening. The PR team made sure cameras captured the emotional moment. Vanessa turned to Amara. "You're truly inspiring. I'll tell this story the right way." Amara left the room, her legs weak but her heart lightening. Ethan walked beside her, his voice low. "You were amazing, Amara." She smiled. "Thank you for being there." Caleb left Summit with a darkened expression. His plan had failed. Amara had turned the trap into a triumph. Beneath the city lights, Amara walked on knowing she had defended the truth. But she also knew the battle wasn't over yet. Beneath the dazzling lights of New York City, Amara Johnson stepped out of St. Mary's Hospital, her heart lighter than it had been in months. The interview at Summit Health, published by Vanessa Lee in the New York Chronicle, under the headline, "A Daughter's Resilience," had gone viral across social media. The video of Amara speaking about caring for her mother Grace and her bold words in the face of Caleb Harper's attack had touched thousands of hearts. The public praised her devotion and demanded that the hospital reconsider its unfair probation ruling. For the 20-year-old black woman, it felt as though light had finally pierced the darkness. One morning, Amara received an email from Helen Carter, the supervisor at St. Mary's Hospital. "Ms. Johnson, we have lifted your probation after reviewing public feedback and your record. You may resume your full internship duties starting Monday. We hope you continue to demonstrate professionalism." Amara's eyes welled up with tears. She ran to the living room where Grace was knitting and threw her arms around her mother. "Mom, I'm going back," she exclaimed. Grace smiled, brushing her daughter's hair back. "I always knew you would." Returning to the hospital was a significant victory. It saved Amara's dream of becoming a nurse. She passed her nursing certification exam with excellent scores, thanks to sleepless nights spent studying after long shifts at Patel's pharmacy. A week later, she received a letter from the New York Community Health Foundation. She'd been awarded a full scholarship covering tuition and living expenses. "You are my light," Grace said, her eyes sparkling with pride. Her health had improved significantly thanks to treatment at Summit Health. Though she still required monitoring, she could walk around the apartment without a nebulizer. Ethan Harper, who had stood beside Amara through the storm, had become essential to her life. One evening, he invited her to Hudson Park, where city lights danced across the water's surface. In the crisp night air, Ethan, wearing a gray sweater, took her hand, his blue eyes gentle. "Amara, you've changed me," he said quietly. "I used to think life was just about work and pressure, but you reminded me that kindness truly matters. I want us to continue, not just as two people helping each other, but as something deeper." Amara blushed, her heart fluttering. She had felt a growing connection to Ethan through their honest moments at the bakery in the park, through text messages, and his constant support. "I want that too, Ethan," she replied softly. "But I still need time. My life is full of challenges." Ethan nodded, smiling. "I'll wait, Amara. We'll face it all together." They stood hand in hand, the city lights above like stars, bearing witness to their quiet promise. Meanwhile, Caleb Harper faced the consequences of his schemes. After reviewing the interview and PR reports from Summit, the Harper Innovations Board summoned him. "Your actions have damaged the company's reputation," the chairman stated. "You are hereby suspended from your position as vice president for 3 months and must undergo a leadership ethics review." Caleb, his face dark, couldn't object. Though he retained a seat on the board, his credibility had crumbled, and his dream of seizing control from Ethan had collapsed. Deep down, he nursed resentment, but for now, he could only retreat. Vanessa Lee, once hired by Caleb to discredit Amara, had been changed by the interview. Her article honored Amara's resilience and the charitable mission of Summit Health, sparking a wave of support for medical sponsorship programs. She sent Amara a handwritten letter. "I'm sorry for doubting you. Your story is a true inspiration." Amara read it, smiled, and chose forgiveness. Her mother had taught her that hatred only weighs the heart down. One afternoon, Amara stood on the hospital rooftop, gazing at the city skyline. She thought of the hard days counting coins at night, fearing job loss the moment she stood before the camera defending the truth. She thought of Ethan, the man who saw her as an intern and someone with big dreams. And she thought of her mother, who had taught her that kindness and persistence could overcome anything. Amara texted Ethan, "I'd like to invite you to dinner at our place with Mom. Just soup she made, but I'd love for you to be there." Ethan replied, "Your and your mother's soup would be an honor. See you tomorrow night." Amara smiled, her heart full. She was no longer the frightened girl on the bus. She was Amara Johnson, a nursing intern, a devoted daughter, and a woman rewriting her story. Under the city lights, Amara descended the hospital stairs, ready for what lay ahead. She knew challenges still awaited: medical bills, work stress, the lingering shadow of Caleb. But she wasn't afraid. With her mother beside her, Ethan by her side, and the strength she had earned, she believed that light would always lead the way. New York, with its endless dreams, was her stage, and she would keep shining.